What is the best bike to commute on? Town bike? E-bike? Cargo bike? Gravel bike? Vintage mountain bike? Folding bike? Fixie? Or the bike equivalent of a Lamborghini? The short answer is, it depends. But in this video, I am going to elaborate on that so that you will be able to find the right commuter bike for you. Firstly, here are the things to think about. What's your budget? And then, how far will you have to ride? And is it flat or hilly? What do you need to take with you? And what type of riding do you enjoy? Basically, all the bikes we have here today are great, but at different things. However, fear not, finding which one is best for you is actually not that hard at all. So to begin with, we're going to split them into two categories. Long haul, which are bikes that are best suited for those long commutes, perhaps 10 kilometers or more, and then short haul, which are bikes that are best suited for zipping or cruising around a town or city. For long haul, if we discount e-bikes for a moment, typically the fastest and most efficient bikes are also going to be the least comfortable, or rather, they'll take the most getting used to. Now, having said that, I'm thinking that if you are tackling a longer commute, you're probably a more experienced cyclist anyway, in which case that's not a problem. And if you're not experienced, but you are going to do a longer commute, you will very quickly become experienced. So I think for those long haul commutes, a road bike makes sense, or a gravel bike, which allows you to fit wider, more comfortable tyres, perhaps mudguards or fenders, and even perhaps a pannier rack as well. As you can see, both of these bikes have drop handlebars on there, and you don't need drop handlebars. A so-called hybrid bike gives you most of the benefits of these, but with a straight handlebar that puts you in a more upright, more comfortable position. However, it should be said that it is still less efficient than these two, so your 10-kilometer commute is going to feel slightly harder. Now, similarly, a gravel bike is less fast and less efficient than a road bike. However, it is also more comfortable and it is definitely going to be more versatile. So I would say for the majority of riders, a gravel bike makes sense if your commute is going to be 10 kilometers, 6 miles or more, which would equate to about 30 minutes of riding. That said, I ride bikes like this because I love them and because I treat my ride to work like I would treat a ride at the weekend, which is to say, it is a treat. And that's an important point as well, right? So bikes are fun, riding is fun, and so choosing a bike that you want to ride simply because you like it is also a perfectly valid reason for it being a great commuter bike. There's very few rights or wrongs here, only what works for you as an individual, and liking it is a perfectly valid reason. Now, there is also nothing stopping you from riding a bike like this on a shorter commute as well. But if your commute is going to be 30 minutes or less, I think that opens up options for a whole host of other bikes that might improve your comfort or might be easier to ride or simply might just look cooler. That is where this type of bike comes in, the short haul bike. A traditional town bike like this is comfortable, it's easy to ride, it's relatively inexpensive, plus there's always a whole host available to buy used and second-hand. However, a bike like this is also slow. And even if you're not worried about speed, to put it another way, you put the same effort in on this bike, you're going to get less out. It is harder to cover distances, and they really don't like going up hills as well. So for short, flat rides only. Unless you get an e-bike version, which is a different ball game entirely. This example is an Orbea DM. And with it, I think you get your style points, you get your comfort, you get your ease of use. And because it's got a motor, you can also ride it quickly and sail effortlessly up hills. Now, of course, e-bikes are more expensive, but if you've got the finances, I think they make a lot of sense. And you can absolutely ride a bike like this for longer distances as well. As mentioned, that motor will power you along up to 25 kilometers an hour. Also with an e-bike, there's no issue with getting hot and sweaty when you ride it either. You absolutely can put effort into riding one if you so wish, but you can also sit back and let that motor do all the work. So you arrive at your destination as fresh as a daisy. The major downside to an e-bike is, of course, as mentioned, the cost. Prices are coming down, but there will always be a premium on it because there's more technology, there's more material in a bike like this. Plus, with that added complexity, there will eventually be more to maintain as well, even if the bike itself can be built with more resistance elements. I mean, on this one, for example, we've got internal hub gears, we've got a belt drive instead of a rusty chain, because weight effectively is less of a consideration when you're riding it, at least. More on that later. The other point to mention is that in Europe and many other parts of the world, e-bike motors by law have to cut out when the bike is going over 25 kilometers per hour. Now, you can still pedal it faster under your own steam, but it will mean that for some riders on some commutes, the motor perhaps isn't as beneficial as you might hope. Now, this is my own e-bike, and I absolutely love it, it's got to be said. Speaking of reliability, to start with, I've not had any issues with the battery or the motor, or any other part of it, in fact, and I've owned it for 2.5 years. So that's just one person and one experience, but still, pretty positive, I'd say. Now, this particular type of bike is a cargo bike, and it's the perfect option if you need to carry loads of stuff, or people. In fact, you can get 2 kids on the back, or in fact, you can get kids and stuff on this bike as well. Despite the motor, I'm not sure I'd personally want to ride it for longer than 30 minutes at a time too frequently, although you definitely can, and people definitely do. The other downside to this bike is that it is quite big. Now, this is a compact cargo bike, but even so, it is a pig to store. It doesn't really like small spaces. And similarly to the Orbea, it is also quite expensive. There is a lot going on this bike. But if you have the money and you have the space, you're golden. And what of your more traditional city bikes, like your Fixie or your reconditioned vintage mountain bike? For me, I think they are absolutely mega. They're inexpensive, they're reliable, they're cheap to run. I mean, a Fixie's not perhaps as beginner-friendly as some types of bikes, but nevertheless, for many people, these are the ultimate bikes for flitting around a city on. And the other thing as well is, as well as being inexpensive in the first place, there's also a whole host of them available secondhand at all times. So check out Marketplace to see what gems you can uncover for not much money. I mean, genuinely, I think this type of bike is great and vastly underrated as well. I mean, they're fast and they're a lot of fun as well. I mean, compared to an e-bike, yeah, you require a little bit more fitness. So perhaps it's not the most accessible bike, but hey, not much. I mean, a vintage mountain bike is about as accessible as it gets. And then what else have we got in our collection? Well, it is the folding bike. This is a Brompton, a modern day icon. Now, it is great if your commute is 30 minutes or less, although plenty of people do more on these daily. But if your commute involves a mixture of riding and public transport, it is an absolute no-brainer. You can easily take this on a bus or a train, plus it's also a great option if you don't have much room to store a bike at home as well. Which, as mentioned previously, can be a bit of an issue, particularly with an e-bike, which is always heavier and is often larger than other types of bikes. So if, for example, you've got to carry it upstairs, you're going to know about it. It is a bit of a problem, particularly something to think about if going up and down stairs is going to be part of your daily routine. I mean, secure storage is always something to think about, in fact, whether it's at home or at your destination. If you've got an expensive bike, then I think paying for insurance is actually a worthwhile investment. Just to give you peace of mind so that you can leave your bike locked up somewhere. There's no point having the perfect commuter bike if you can't do anything with it when you get to your destination. And then I suppose that's the other point about those inexpensive Fixies or vintage mountain bikes. There is something absolutely brilliant about having a bike that you don't feel too scared to leave locked up outside a pub or something like that. An inexpensive bike can be worth its weight in gold for that reason, so to speak. To summarise then, firstly, ask yourself the question, is your commute long haul or short haul? Now, I've suggested that 30 minutes is the line between the two, but it's a blurred line, and that's a fairly arbitrary figure based on me. So you might think that actually it's longer or shorter. Either way, if you decide that your commute is a long haul commute, then consider efficiency as the key here. So a road bike is good, a gravel bike is even better for that added practicality and versatility. Drop handlebars are the most efficient, but a flat handlebar is absolutely fine too if you want to prioritize a bit more comfort. And remember as well, e-bikes here are a really good option if you've got a particularly hilly commute. Now, if your commute is short haul, well, the world's your oyster. You choose what you like based on comfort or versatility, practicality, or simply style. But again, I would say if you've got the resources and you live somewhere particularly hilly, then an e-bike is absolutely great. You may not think that you need a motor, but once you've got one, the thing that I found is that I tend to ride my bike more because it's that bit easier. So something to think about, right? The ultimate commuter bike is probably the one that gets you on it the most as well. Very interested to hear your thoughts on this subject. If you've already got a favourite commuter bike, then let us know in the comment section down below. And please, if you enjoy this type of content as well, make sure you hit the thumbs up button to let us know. We'd love to do more commuter content for you. And there's also loads already on the channel as well. So make sure you subscribe to GCN if you don't already.